basically the Jews are saying that they were dispersed through Europe, and without them, the Reformation couldn't have happened. But it's wrong for Catholics then to just blame the Jews. It's like with pornography. It's a very Jewish-led industry. But no Catholic who looks at pornography can blame the pornographer. It's their own sin. It's like usually you go into a debt, and debt cripples countries and nations, and that's what's bringing about this one world order. We can't just blame the banks and the usurers. They will have to answer to God for that. But if you go into a debt that you don't need for the sake of some frivolous spending, and we're meant to live in simplicity, whoever we are, like priests especially don't need a lot of money. Lay people normally need a good deal more. But if we're going into unnecessary debt, we have to answer for that, because that's what's feeding the beast. 100 million people who have unnecessary debts makes a very small group of people very powerful.
Yeah. That's such a great point because you see what happens when, look, there are very powerful people, very powerful Jews behind the banking industry, behind pornography, behind Hollywood, and they are controlling narratives. And you can see just in the whole after World War II, the narratives that came out, because Rob and I both listened to this thing on Stalin, of how evil Stalin was and what he did in the Holodomor and what he did to Catholics in Russia under communism. But you barely hear anything about that. And all you hear about is the Nazi narrative, right? And that's because there are very powerful people that have an influence on that. But like you're saying, it's 100% true that you can't, like, if you get yourself in debt or if you're hooked on pornography, you can't blame the person that put it out. We are all individually responsible for our own sins. They will answer for what they did, but you and I will have to answer for what we did.
Yeah. So you had Jews who brought the gospel to the whole world, the apostles and their successors, right? You had a Jew who brought Jesus Christ into the world, Our Lady. So they have been chosen by God to bring the greatest goods to everyone. And without their land, when they lost their land, which every nation needs a land to keep its identity, they're called, I believe, to the land that is the Catholic Church, to be leaders of the Catholic Church, and heaven is their only homeland, so you're not distracted with the worldly temporal things. There is a natural political order, which is good. And then there's the spiritual order run by the church above it. And when the corruption of the best is the worst. When we reject that call from God, then the most damage is done. But we can't solve anything, I think, by just pointing the finger. We should be aware of it. We can be aware of it. Yeah. But the deepest difference between human beings is our orientation to the crucifixion. Whether seeing that we see the Son of God died to save us because of our sins and we adore him, or whether we are indifferent to the crucifixion and excuse it and even mock him. Now, most non-Christians, like Hindus and Buddhists, the crucifixion wasn't in their text, right? When they started, they don't take a position for or against, but if they hear about the crucifixion, they'll have a natural sympathy for Jesus. Oh, how he suffered, this poor man, that you see the man, how he suffered. And St. John writes 1 John 2:19, I think, if you don't love your brother who you do see, you can't love God who you don't see. So when you look at the crucifixion, you see your brother. And if you're moved to sympathy and compassion, instead of the passion with him, God will draw you to him. But if you are indifferent to it, so cold-hearted, that this man who suffered so much and who's innocent, and then if looking into his story, if today you justify it, which some Jews do by saying Jesus was a blasphemer, or he broke the Sabbath, or broke the law of Moses, which he never did, it's as unjust today to say that now as it was then. It's all framed. He never broke the law of Moses. It was the traditions of men, which have no place in God's scheme, that he challenged. But they justify it now. That is the worst thing you can do spiritually for the whole world. In our heart, in our will, is the lever for, you can put that into the hands of God or the hands of Satan, to either raise the whole world with grace and light, or to sink it into darkness. by whether or not you love your brother who you see suffering on the cross, because he is God, and you don't know that first time just by looking at the crucifixion. But if you say, why did he suffer so much? You begin to find out that he must be God. You find out that he was, that's the charges against him were blasphemy.
What an unbelievable insight. Like your first initial reaction to seeing the God-man crucified. If it's, well, no, he was a criminal and he broke the Sabbath and he did all these things, and that's his indifferent reaction to this innocent man being crucified. But if your heart is moved to compassion, it's something in us where I think anyone who's sought has found. Like there's nobody who, when Jesus says, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open, I don't think anybody who's ever genuinely looked for God has not found him, because God really does. It's a disposition of the heart. It's not a matter of proof.
And it can take a lifetime. It can take a lifetime. You know, some like Saint Therese of Lisieux, they're there when they're 7 years old.
Yeah.
But other people, that's why God gives us 70, 80 years. God. And it's much more powerful than evil. The thing about compassionating our crucified Savior, which are reminded of so powerfully on Good Friday in the old liturgy, is also to look at his mother. Because even if certain Jews want to argue that Jesus broke the law of Moses, which they can never prove from the Old Testament scriptures, never. How can you have anything against the Virgin Mary, the mother of God? How can you not say that mother standing on the cross, seeing her son crucified, it's breaking her heart, even though she did it willingly for the sake of our salvation. We know that from the faith. But even just looking at her, to insult Mary, anybody who insults Mary, reveals the hell that's in their heart. You just can't do that. You can't be indifferent to a mother who's losing their son, even if you've got something against the son.
I worry about a lot of I especially like Protestant online things that go on. I can understand not grasping the Catholic concept of Mary being sinless and stuff, but there are some people that go on these tirades about Mary and talk about her as if she's just some woman. It's like the God of the universe, the God who created everything, is going to come into the world and be amongst us. And you think the woman he's going to, you don't think she has to be sinless? Like, you really have to think about that. Like, God who created everything is going to come into the world. You get on your knees and revere that. It's like, this woman is about to receive the God who created everything. How can you be so callous to think that she's just some woman?
Well, yesterday on the Feast of her Nativity, the second antiphon for Lauds and Vespers speaks of today is the birthday of Our Lady, whose glorious life illumines the whole church, which is true. If you think of material goods like a cake, the more you take of it, the less other people are going to have, right? Or the more people who want a bit, the smaller they're going to get. Yeah. But spiritual goods, immaterial goods, don't diminish no matter how many people participate. So like the number 7, you can never run out of the number 7. Yeah. Or if the truth goes out there, it never runs out because more and more people know this truth. And the higher spiritual goods are actually persons. They're what God has made in a soul. So this immaculately conceived soul of Our Lady is the highest created good as a person, of a creature. And she's now reigning in heaven, pouring out more good than any human being can upon the church. Jesus had assumed human nature, but he's a divine person, united with the human nature. So I'll let the role of the good, basically, and the humble 7-year-old, the powerless layperson, is greater for moving the whole universe than any pope or claimant to be pope or any bank or any globalists. They have nothing compared to a will that decides it's just going to keep giving for God and seeking him no matter all the obstacles thrown in the path. Yeah. Like if you look into the abyss, it sucks you down. You had Michael Hitchborn on talking about Teilhard de Chardin, right? I've just been reading some, I don't read a lot of this stuff because it's so horrible, Kabbalah texts. It sounds like the author of the Quran on LSD. It's so nuts and
Yeah.
awful.
Well, that's why I asked, do you think he was actually on hallucinogens, or do you think he really had an
No,
encounter with the demonic?
it's the same voice that you get in the Gnostic heresies of the early centuries, and then you hear it in the Quran. The same voice. It's poetry, but it's not clear. It's not reasonable.
Mhm.
It's not beautiful. It's mesmerizing poetry, but it's all a lie. You were talking about the narrative before, establishing a narrative. Most narratives are just evil. It's an attempt to do what God did by speaking to create, and what the priest does in Holy Mass, saying, "This is my body." That this is the truth, which is creative, the highest truth by which we live. And the devil wants to assert another a lie for the sake of murder. And that's why they build up these narratives, trying to force people's minds into a certain.
Well, you see how important narrative is, right? How does God reveal himself to us? He reveals himself to us through a story, right? Like, there's something so powerful about stories that they have shaped the entire Western world as we come through time. I mean, the stories you hear in the Old Testament and the New literally created the modern world that we see today. So if they can capture the power of story and give us a new story to live by, like the whole idea of what we're doing with the Christian story is you are part of it. Everyone wants to be part of something big, right? And when you really see your place in the Christian story, you are just as important as any saint that came before us.
It's a reality that matters, not, in fact, the story. The story can't create the reality unless it's the one that God tells, right?
Yeah.
And that we're participating in him, in reality. And this idea of a story, Hollywood is brilliant at telling stories.
Yeah.
But that is a narrative, a false narrative.
A false narrative, yeah.
Yeah. And the Kabbalah texts written in the Middle Ages that echo the Quran and the Gnostics, because the Islam basically was a product of the Jews in Saudi Arabia telling the polytheists there, our prophet is coming. Moses promised us the prophet in Deuteronomy 8:18, who will come and he will put you all down and you will worship in the way that we say. We've had this promised prophet. So then Satan and Muhammad's wife and uncle get him and say, you're the prophet that Moses spoke of. Now, if the Jews had accepted Jesus by that stage, they would say, well, Jesus is the one that Moses promised. We wouldn't have had Islam. And it backfired on them, denying Jesus. And it's the same story in the Reformation. And it's the same story in modern times. That's all going to be in the second volume of my book, if you believe.
Yeah, because you've been researching. Look, there's something to Michael Jones's book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Like, when you reject Logos, it sin darkens the intellect, and it will actually put you into this revolutionary spirit where you just want to overturn everything. And there is Jews that are behind a lot of these major events in history that are counter to us, to our story.
Yeah, there's a Jewish writer, Israel Sharak, who is he's so open about the problems of Judaism, but in partly he's resenting the rabbis and the control that they've had. He sees that as very oppressive and totalitarian. The most totalitarian society, he says, is classical Judaism from the 2nd to the 18th century, how oppressive they were to their communities. Now, I don't think it's quite what he says, because he thinks that any religious order is oppressive. But this is the problem. When the poor Jews got emancipated, they're like psychotic, breaking out into what they think is freedom. We have to throw off every order which is oppressing our spirit. And that's why they become these revolutionaries. And they lead the revolutions. Like Solzhenitsyn said in Russia that the majority of Jews were not revolutionaries and the majority of revolutionaries were not Jews, but the Jews are very overrepresented among the Bolsheviks. Like the State Department now, most Jews aren't pushing for war with Russia. And most people pushing for war with Russia are not Jews. But the predominant weight fully overrepresented. I think 2.5% of Americans are Jewish. 25% of Biden's cabinet are Jewish. How is that possible?
Yeah.
At least. And it's even worse in the State Department. And they hate Russia.
You think that goes back to the time of World War II, the Bolshevik Revolution and stuff?
All the way. The more you look into it, just the further back you go, everything comes back to the crucifixion and to the Garden of Eden, which is the same scene as the crucifixion, but seen through a different filter. God laid it all out there to show what will be fulfilled on Calvary in a dark way that gets transformed into light by that hidden will in the hearts of Mary and Jesus, the Immaculate Heart and the Sacred Heart, who took all the evil that the world could throw at them, all of it, and they did not sin at all, and they didn't hate to take all the evil of the world and not waver from wanting to do the will of the Father. That's just so good. It's so good. And when we trace the evils of the world around us, they all lead back to our reaction to the crucifixion.
Yeah. We were talking the other day just how because we were talking about like how they're trying to they're trying to grow these fake human embryos, and they're always trying to do this weird stuff with science where they're making human animal hybrids, and all of it comes back to that no matter how much we think we have advanced, we are never changed. We are doing the same thing that Lucifer does before the fall, and we're doing the same thing with the rebellion in the Garden of Eden. Every single thing that humans do is always they want to make themselves God.
Yeah. And it's going to reach a point where I think they completely destroy their own platform of the rejection of God. It will lead into the abyss and death. We'll see that happen on earth in the last generation. And those who have sought to adore God will still be standing, and the life from them will proliferate. That's why now parents who love their children are defeating all the globalists. They're defeating Satan by loving their children. It's that easy. Yeah. And it's something you can do constantly.
You were talking about Our Lady before, and it's like, if you go back to even St. John Bosco's dream, he talks about like the boat in the rough waters, and there's two pillars, and one is the Eucharist and one is Our Lady. And I think what we're seeing in the church right now is everything that we thought was the church is going to go through incredible tribulation. So I really think we're in the tribulation right now. You know, it's spiritual at the moment. It hasn't become it, but you really are seeing the battle of Armageddon between these other gods trying to rise up and usurp God's real throne, and there's a spiritual war going on. But if we keep our eyes focused on the Eucharist and Our Lady, those will be the things that prevent us from falling for some of the deceptions that are going to be coming our way.
Yeah, and they'll bring you into contact with like-minded people who you will need to stand in the end. We won't stand on our own. You can be martyred on your own, but to if that's your calling, but to come through, we need these networks. So we have time now. I think what we're seeing now is that everything's going global, but it's certainly not yet heated up as to where it's going to get. I mean, it's going to get nasty. It'll be fine though, because God prepares his children for what's coming. He's preparing us. No one will have to face more than they can handle.
I think these conversations are part of God preparing us, right? Like even us just having these conversations. You were saying Russia and America, like they're all, and even the Abu Dhabi thing and that interfaith building they're building, you think they're actually going to gear towards putting a temple on the Temple Mount?
Yes. And when people are trying to work out what's going wrong in the world, I don't believe human beings are capable of a multi-generational conspiracy where for hundreds of years you're aiming at a particular goal. If it's purely for self-interest, you don't sacrifice your life to make yourself rich, because if you die, your riches are worth nothing. But the dream of rebuilding the temple has been there for 2,000 years. And it's the devil who knows where all this is going. Like the whole transgender thing, like your body is a temple of God. You mess with the body, try and change male and female. The spiritual meaning of this is the male represents the divine and the female represents the created. You're trying to change the positions of creature and creator, of God and man, by messing with the bodies of men or women. I think and rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem is basically stating that Jesus Christ didn't raise the temple on the third day with the resurrection. And so you reject everything that God has given to us to do that. Now, that goal has always been sought, but only the devil has known the steps, like the Arianism. Arius was a Jew, and we don't hear that. And then Islam, and then the Albigensian heresies, and then the Reformation, and before that, the Renaissance, which is very Kabbalistic, and then the Enlightenment, which is nothing to do with light. It's to do with Lucifer, the fallen light. And then the world wars, and then the COVID lockdowns. It's all part of his long-term plan to bring this about. But I don't think you can blame human beings for that. We're not capable of that much evil. We're only capable of a certain amount of evil in our own life. And you might think ahead for your children's generation.
But you're not thinking 4 or 5 generations.
Now
we did in the Middle Ages, as like the church thought in centuries. So they would build a cathedral that would take 400 or 500 years to build, but that's because the church was thinking.
But it's a spiritual good, yes.
Yeah,
and you can, for a spiritual good, that actually translates onto an eternal scale.
Yeah,
and the Holy Spirit is the one who is the general who assembles that. He has the strategy. That's why he's not flapping by everything that's going wrong now. It's like he's the master of 12-dimensional chess. You know, he knows that the devil is just playing into God's hands. Like with the crucifixion, you kill Jesus, and what happens? The whole world receives the light of the resurrection if their eyes are open, if their hearts are open.
Yeah.
And the same thing's happening now, or in the last generations. It's actually which is why if you can bear with evil now without becoming evil, if you can pray for your persecutors, we have to reach this crunch point. I'm not saying you roll over and don't fight injustice. Of course, we should fight injustice, fight lies. But in the end, if it takes us, it takes us, right? And it's all God building up his temple in heaven. We become quarried stones here on earth, but end up being assembled in his heaven there for eternity.
It's okay. So, I think people really need to understand the significance of the temple in the Old Testament. It is everything for Judaism, right? Mm-hmm. So when Jesus says, tear down this temple and in 3 days I will rebuild it, the idea that Jesus's body is the temple, and that when the first temple is destroyed, that Christians really understood we no longer need to offer sacrifice in this building in Israel, because Jesus is the new temple.
Well, and that was the second temple for the record.
I'm sorry, second temple. But Jesus is the new temple, and this kingdom, you no longer have to travel to Jerusalem to be in this kingdom, because wherever the king is, there is the kingdom, and wherever the Eucharist is celebrated, there is the king. So you no longer have this geographical focused temple. The temple is everywhere the mass is celebrated. Mm-hmm. So this idea that you need another temple, and even this thing that Francis is doing with building this interfaith house over there, and I think with the synod, what they're doing with ecumenism, all of it is a conditioning for us to think that you can have this brotherhood of man without Jesus Christ as the new temple. And we were saying the other night that everybody seems to be getting sidetracked into these little things with the synod, thinking it's going to be about women deacons and it's going to be about blessing same-sex union. Yeah, those are going to probably be pushed. But the real diabolical thing is this interfaith communion that Francis is. You saw this Brazilian bishop gave the Eucharist to a Muslim. You're seeing that they just want to give communion to everyone because everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. And it's the most diabolical thing ever, because the sin of Judas, which really comes down to not believing the Eucharist, is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ is what's really being pushed here. And you see in the defense of that Brazilian bishop, another bishop came out to defend and said, is it really that big of a deal that we gave the Eucharist to him? Yes, it is the biggest deal in the world.
Yes, you're totally right.